Hello, friends. Ted Wilcox here again to bring you into another thrilling chapter in our continuing saga of magic, mystery, and the American century. But before we begin, here's Charlie Pulcher with a brief review of our last episode.
Last time, after her run-in with a mysterious and deeply unsettling figure moving through Joshua Norton Park, Mickey continued following the trail left behind by Hallie Baptiste's abductors, bringing the tire scrapings she recovered to the one place in San Francisco capable of identifying them, Fleischburg's luxury Magi Mechanics. Beneath the polished storefront and enchanted garage bays, Mickey reunited with old friends, master craftsmen Ibrahim and Rosie Fleischburg, while rumors of political corruption, Cloud 9 expansion, and dangerous new Magitech simmered in the background. And as Rosie accepted Mickey's challenge to identify the mysterious military-grade tires before the FBI could, the investigation finally began to accelerate. But answers in this city never come easy. What happens next? We'll find out now.
This is the Mythic Chronicles. Entry 1. Crime Wave.
Chapter 23. Mickey Plays with Toys. October 25th, 1951. Mickey watched the grin spread across Rosie's face. Little motes of dust kicked up from her soldering bench, backlit by the warehouse's high windows, and the combination gave the exquisitely made-up dwarf a mischievous, pixie-like air. "Oh, I like this game," she said, snatching the bag from Mickey's fingers. She studied the contents, lips pursed. "I can do it in 2 hours, or your tune-up's free." Mickey stuck out a hand. "Deal." "Ah," Rosie added, locking Mickey's hand in a surprisingly vice-like grip and raising a finger with her free hand. "If I beat the time, you pay Ibrahim full price." Mickey grimaced, no longer thinking her ingenious plan to distract Rosie quite so genius. Fine." Grin never wavering, Rosie released Mickey and led her to a contraption that looked like a microscope crossbred with a jukebox, its core pulsing with a soft, steady glow. Humming along to the background klezmer music, the artificer plugged in a monitor cable and furrowed her brow as she twisted a dial. Mickey watched as the crystals on the device glowed blue and the screen blinked to life, white on blue text scrolling across it. With a nod, Rosie sprinkled the sample into a petri dish and slid it beneath the lens. Another turn of the dial, a short breath, and golden motes flared to life, swirling like sunlit dust over the shavings. "There," she said, turning back to Mickey. "That needs to run for a bit." Mickey sighed wistfully as she glanced around the cluttered brilliance of the lab. "Gee," she said, arching a brow at her friend. "How should we spend the time?" Rosie's face stayed neutral, though her eyes seemed to shine just a little brighter. "We could catch up. You could tell me what you've been doing these last 6 months." Pretending not to hear, Mickey ran her fingers along the spindle beside Rosie's workstation, feigning inspection. If only there were a fun way to kill 2 hours, she mused aloud. Now what could that be? Well, I am standing in the world's greatest artificer's shop. Rosie raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, so?" Mickey glanced at her feet, feigning sheepishness. "So, I don't know. I'd be a fool not to sample some of the new wares, wouldn't I?" Rosie crossed her arms. "Interesting. And what's in it for said world's greatest artificer?" "Free advertising," Mickey said without missing a beat. Rosie rolled her eyes. "The only people who see you use my gear end up dead or in prison," she scoffed. Mickey shrugged, tilting her head innocently and giving her voice a girlish little lilt. "How about because I'm just so very cute?" Rosie gave her a flat stare. "Boobale. You expect me to hand over my top-of-the-line, highly valuable, outrageously expensive merchandise for free because you're cute?" "No," Mickey said, batting her lashes. "Because I'm so very cute." Rosie's composure cracked as she snorted, and both women burst into laughter. "Well," Rosie said, shaking her head, "I may just happen to have a few new toys lying around." Mickey's eyes lit up. "Now you're talking." Rosie held up a hand. "Afterwards, we sit down and talk. All right?" Mickey sighed, but nodded. "All right," she confirmed. Satisfied, Rosie led her past shelf after shelf of semi-organized chaos to a corner draped in a large white sheet. Mickey arched a brow. "What did you do? See me coming and cover this stuff up for dramatic effect?" "No," Rosie sniffed. "I had the tune there do it. Now hush, you're spoiling my fun." With a flourish, she yanked the sheet away. "Ta-da!" Mickey blinked, frowned, tilted her head. "These are actually toys." Rosie beamed. "I've been thinking about your particular skill set, not just the regular stuff." "But I like the regular stuff," Mickey whined. Rosie placed her hands on her hips that reminded Mickey of the years she'd spent with the woman as a young agent at the bureau. "Michelle, sweetie, do you trust me?" Mickey sighed. "With my life." "Then let me show you." Rosie grabbed a bag and began filling it with what looked like children's toys. "You know why you're my favorite doll? It's not just 'cause we go back a few years. I'm old. I got plenty of friends I've known far longer than you." Mickey smirked. "Gee, Rosie, I'm touched." Rosie didn't so much hand it over as dump the now overstuffed bag into Mickey's arms before grabbing another. "It's because your magical proclivities are so unique. You're a puzzle box, an oddity, a blatant, unmistakable freak of natural magic." Mickey grunted under the weight. Thanks?" "No," Rosie said, reaching up to pinch her cheek. "Thank you, you beautiful, sweet, oh-so-strange aberration." Then she spun and marched deeper into the facility. "Follow me." Staggering under the heavy bag of toys, Mickey followed Rosie into a new area. This one was set up like a gun range, with steel-framed mannequins standing in for paper targets. "So," Rosie said, plopping her bag onto the table and motioning for Mickey to do the same. "Thaumaturgy 101. What do we know about magic?" Mickey blinked. As a hunter, she knew plenty about what magic did, but almost nothing about how it worked. That was for people like Rosie. She didn't need to know how a gun functioned, as long as she pointed and pulled the trigger, and it made things go away. She didn't care. Rosie rolled her eyes. "Don't blow a fuse, doll. Just sit and listen. Consider this your own personal great revelation." Mickey muttered something about where Rosie could stick her revelation, but sat as her friend wheeled over a clean chalkboard. "Magic," she said, scrawling the word across the board, "is energy manipulated for specific purposes. Human scientists used to think it broke the rules of pre-revelatory physics, but we mythics, who've worked with it since the dawn of thought, know better. Magic doesn't break those laws. It expands them. And like physics, it operates under a strict set of rules." She wrote laws and circled it. "For today, we care about the law of origin. It says magic comes from 3 sources." She ticked them off, chalk clicking against the board. 1. Ultimate beings. They go by a lot of names, but most folks call them the divine, or gods. 2. Nature. Or, more precisely, the life energy of living organisms. That's what powers all those fancy crystals. She grimaced. I could rant about the ethics of that idiocy, but we don't have time for an environmental lecture, so moving on. And 3, spirit, she said, writing the word and circling it a few times. Also called anima. Some say it's cosmic life energy. Others call it grace made manifest. Many, myself included, believe it's the soul itself. But whichever camp you fall into, everyone agrees. It's what lets higher life forms use magic at will. She turned, chalk still in hand. With me so far, doll? Mickey rolled her eyes. Yes, Professor. Good. Now, anima may let any Tom, Dick, or Harriet use magic, but it's limited. Why? It depends on the strength of the user, Mickey guessed. Or, by your logic, the strength of their soul. Exactly. We all start with a baseline, but that baseline shifts depending on your natural inclination, Rosie said, gesturing with her hands like she was balancing invisible scales. That's why you usually see specialists, not generalists, among the mortal races. Mastering every form of magic takes time and effort. Lots of it. We're talking millennia. Time only gods can actually afford. And even they tend to stick to whatever falls under their domain. She shook her head with a sigh. But that's another can of squirmy, divine, reality-bending worms. And we don't have time for that mess. Mickey furrowed her brow. This is why I avoid theory, she muttered. Too many tangents, too few answers. She exhaled slowly, trying to organize her thoughts. All right, so, getting away from the squirmy gods, if everyone else starts at a baseline, why are mythics so much better at magic than humans? Rosie raised a finger. We aren't. It just seems that way, because each type of being, each individual, starts from a different baseline. Mickey frowned. That doesn't seem fair. Rosie shrugged. No one said it was, doll. But that doesn't change the facts. Same thing with nature. Some creatures climb better, some swim better, some burrow. You get the idea. We developed magical strengths the same way. It varies based on environment, biology, even culture. And sure, there are always outliers, but patterns do emerge. She pointed at the golden bear medallion around Mickey's neck. And I wouldn't complain if I were you. She nodded at it. Your people, like a lot of Insula native populations, were using totems long before the revelation. That legacy makes your anima more efficient with focuses. Costs you less, hits harder. You're not stronger than the average John Smith, but you started from a different place on the scale. Her eyes twinkled. You can't tell me that little advantage hasn't come in handy once or twice. Mickey's fingers brushed the medallion. As usual, it stirred certain memories, but she shoved them down, forcing her focus back to the conversation. So, in a few hundred years, will it all even out? She asked. Rosie shrugged. More like a few thousand, she said. But probably. For now, magic is a skill. And like any skill, with enough training and discipline, someone can catch up to raw talent. You just have to learn to stand before you can walk. Mickey nodded. But it's easier to stick with what you're good at. Once you find something that works, you lean into it. And what starts as a small gap turns into a chasm. Not because it has to, just because it's easier that way. She shrugged. I mean, sure, someone could catch me. But why bother when what they've got works just fine? Rosie smiled. I guess you do have a brain hidden behind that pretty face, she said, ignoring Mickey's rude gesture and pressing on. It's also why people use spells. No training required. Just some reading, a little oomph, and you're in business. A focus is just a spell attached to an object. They fall into two types. She held up a finger. Unitary and amelioration. Mickey blinked. Could you try the English versions of those words, please? Rosie rolled her eyes. Oy, this is why I have a problem with the educational system. She took a calming breath. Okay, first, unitary foci. One effect, one purpose. Like a leaf blower. It blows air. Simple as that. It's easy to use, and thanks to the focusing effect of the glyph work, it costs a lot less anima than casting the spell raw. Mickey's eyebrows crinkled as she thought. So, what about those hoverboards kids are obsessed with? She asked. They do more than one thing. They're still unitary foci, Rosie said, but they've been linearly superimposed. Mickey blinked. Right, of course. Rosie sighed. It means a bunch of spells stacked on top of each other. Gotcha. Why not just say that? May I continue? Mickey grinned. Please do. As you so astutely pointed out, Rosie said, lips twitching into a smirk, even as she shot Mickey an annoyed glance. Complex devices use multiple glyphs stacked together to produce multiple effects. That's how you get tools that do more than one thing. But like I said at the beginning of all this, magic follows laws. The more spells you stack, the more complex the system. Some systems, like what the arrogant pricks at the API are doing with their hypertranstachyon calibration devices, the ones they're using to transmit those scry spells halfway across the globe, can get uber complex. I mean, how those idiots plan to power something like that responsibly when alpha-grade crystals are so damn expensive is not only fiscally irresponsible, it's dangerous. If some poor fool tried to power one of those rigs on their own, they'd drain themselves dry. Best case scenario? Coma. More likely, they end up a pile of dust on someone's overpriced floor. Mickey frowned slightly. Wait, they're transmitting spells now? Before Rosie could reply, she shook her head, cutting her off. Never mind. Listen, Rosie, unless you want my brain to start melting out my ears, you may want to stay on topic here. Rosie blinked. Oh, she said, clearing her throat. Right. Sorry, doll. Jumped ahead to Thaumaturgy 201. Where was I? Unity foci equals simple. Lots stacked together equals not simple, Mickey supplied. Rosie nodded. Right. And the more complex a system, the higher the output. The higher the output, the higher the cost. So the more foci on a device, the more juice it needs to run. This is where power crystals come in, Rosie continued. Crystals store energy, oodles of it. Depending on the grade, oodles and boodles. And while it's incredibly expensive, not to mention dangerous, sure, they say their devices come with built-in so-called safeguards to keep the draw within survivable limits, but considering they've got their fingers in every government oversight committee supposedly policing them, there are enough corners being cut that there's no way. Mickey cleared her throat pointedly, earning an eye roll from Rosie before she finished. They are rechargeable. She jabbed the chalk at the board, then seemed to rein herself in. Which brings us to the second class of focus, amelioration foci, enhancers, or as I like to call them, boosters. They take an ability, a spell, whatever, and make it better. You don't see them much. They've got to be custom built for a specific magical effect or a specific user. And if they're not tuned right, Mickey arched a brow. More dead? Unfazed, Rosie grabbed a rag and wiped her hands. If they are tuned properly, they can drastically reduce the cost of more complex systems. But artificers are only beginning to scratch the surface of that kind of tech. It's still faster, and a whole lot safer, to stack spells linearly and power them with heavy-duty crystals. She tossed the towel onto the table and turned to Mickey. So, why do I bring all this up? Mickey smirked. I have a feeling I'm about to find out. Rosie crossed her arms. I know it's been almost 15 minutes and you haven't shot anything, but try to stay with me. Magically speaking. What do we know about Michelle McFinn? Mickey shrugged. I make lightning. Rosie gave her an unimpressed look. You know what I'm asking. Mickey sighed. Sometimes I can boost things on my own, make them work better without a focus. Rosie snorted. Doll, that is such an understatement of the magic you perform naturally, but is so complex that the rest of us schmucks need highly advanced, intricately designed foci just to barely manage it. It's borderline offensive. She shook her head, and her voice softened. You don't just boost. You intuitively transmute non-living objects into amelioration foci. That's magic beyond anything I've ever seen, or, for that matter, ever even heard of. Mickey frowned. That can't be right. Sweetie, Rosie said, spreading her hands. I've looked, spent years looking, and I've come up with bupkis. It's simple. What you can do is... She shrugged. Special. Mickey shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Not that it does me much good, she muttered. It's unstable. Anything I'm not trying to blow up is a gamble. I already have all the foci I need thanks to you. It makes my thing kind of redundant. Rosie's eyes gleamed. What if I told you, with the right foci, you could boost already ameliorated powers? Mickey blinked. That could be interesting. Rosie grinned, sharp as a switchblade. What's your number one obstacle in life? I'm not tall enough to reach most top shelves, Mickey deadpanned. Rosie rubbed her face. Of all the people, I had to choose this one as my... She cut herself off. No, dummy. People don't see a hunter. They see a cute little thing with golden eyes and a nice figure. Oh, yeah, that too. Well, that's also your advantage. You're overlooked, underestimated, and while most people these days can sense magical energy, she held up a small plastic egg, the kind that was used to hold silly putty. A woman with toys in her purse? Just looks like a silly girl with knickknacks, Mickey finished. Rosie winked and handed over the egg. Regular silly putty, moldable, bouncy, picks up ink from newspapers. But for you... Mickey cracked it open. Inside, the putty shimmered with tiny crystalline flecks glinting like stars. It's a highly versatile amelioration compound, Rosie said. Can you feel it? Mickey nodded. The putty tugged at her, like it wanted her magic. Without thinking, she let it. She boosted. Her anima surged into it, and the material crackled with golden sparks. Wait! Rosie yelped. Mickey blinked as Rosie smacked the putty from her hand and tackled her behind the safety barrier just as it rolled onto the range. A heartbeat later, it exploded. Lightning and concussive force ripped through the air, sending mannequins flying. Coughing through the smoke, ears ringing, Mickey rolled out from under Rosie and stared at the scorched spot where the putty had been. Rosie sat up, smoothing her hair. Okay, my fault. I should have said not to activate the rare, unstable weaponry without instructions. Mickey couldn't help the sheepish grin that spread across her face. Wow, I feel fine. Little winded. That barely took any anima at all. If you'd let me finish, Rosie said, checking her reflection in the now scuffed metal shield. The focus reacts to your intent. It enhances your ability to store detonation potential and lets you release the energy on command, your standard type of boom. But if you focus on the enhancement, it increases the explosive output while staying stable as long as you concentrate. She handed over a second egg. Plus, it's sticky. Should adhere to most surfaces. Now give it another try. Mickey nodded and focused on the putty. Wait, she froze, eyes snapping to Rosie. The dwarf nodded and took a large step behind the shield, slipped on oversized safety glasses, popped in a pair of earplugs, and gave a chipper thumbs up. Okay, now give it a try. Mickey shot her an exasperated look, but turned back to the putty. This time she started with lightning. The compound drank it in, glowing faintly, then crackling. She held the charge. It was like patting her head and rubbing her stomach at the same time, but she focused and layered her boosting ability on top. The magic didn't make any sound, but she felt it work, like something inside her clicked, locked into place. The glow faded, but she could still feel it was armed, stable, and waiting. She raised an eyebrow. Throw it, Rosie urged. Mickey hurled the putty down the range and dove behind the barrier just as she released the charge. Even with the shield, the shockwave hit like the world's strongest man swinging a pillow. She and Rosie hit the floor, laughing as mannequin limbs rained down like confetti. A fresh crater marked the range. Coughing through the haze, Mickey shouted, Are you sure you're a dwarf and not an elf? Because I'm pretty sure this is Christmas morning. The grins on both women were absolutely maniacal. Mickey clapped her hands together. Okay, what else you got? Rosie, eyes bright with mischief, reached for more toys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Mythic Chronicles. The story continues every Tuesday and Thursday. If you're enjoying the journey, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast. Your words might help bring more mythics into the fold. To listen ahead, unlock bonus content, and gain access to VIP Discord roles and behind-the-scenes updates, check out our Patreon or visit us at SeanTLaffertyBooks.com. I'm Sean. Thanks again for being here.